ever since Kellen Moore got hired, that's when the draft just became like the big topic. We talked about what they might do at 9, they might do at 40. Who should it be? Should it be a running back? Should it be a quarterback? Should it be a receiver? Derek Carr got hurt, then that made quarterback talk go up. But what does a trade back look like? What does that scenario look like? Is that a reality that's on the table? Is that a possibility?
I think that's what they should do. I mean, easy for me to say now. Like I say this all the time. Here's my disclaimer: is if they're sitting there at 9 and they've got their number 5, number 6 guy on the board, take him. Like I can look at the draft and say, oh, all the guys at 9 are the same as the guys at 19. I can say that. But if they've got their number 5 guy on the board at number 9 and his magnet is all there in its own tier and everybody else is in another tier, you take the guy. So I'm not saying that, but I do think more than, like, we do these mock draft exercises every week. Check it out on the site. Me and Nick just did another one the other day. And for me, it's threefold, really. It's I like so many of these guys going in the 20s. I like a couple offensive linemen there. I think the corners come into play there. I think some extra receivers come into play. I know you've heard me say how much I like Ibuka from Ohio State. I just, and frankly, if you trade down to 1920 now, maybe you can start thinking about a quarterback that might not make sense at 9. I really like being there so much more. Now, look, we know the Saints don't operate that way. Just asked Mickey Loomis about this about a month ago, and he still just went into this diatribe. He goes, when you trade up, this is why the Saints have traded up like 20 straight times since 2007, since the last time they traded down. He said, when you trade up, you're going to get a guy. You're going to get a guy you love. You're doing it for a reason because you love this guy. When you trade down, you don't know who you're going to get. You're trading down for, boy, I hope it works out for us. And that's why they don't like to do it. But we are talking about a Saints team that, and we're going to talk about this later, what do they need most? It's like a 5-way tie. They need every position. They need bodies in here. They need to replenish their youth. And this does feel like a draft. This is what experts are saying, analysts are saying, it does feel like a spot where once you get past that top 5, the player you're picking at 10 and the player you're picking at 20, there's not a ton of separation. So easy for me to say I'd like them to do that. But just, I thought it'd be worth going through an exercise and being like, all right, what would that look like? And so I went through the numbers and the history of it. Basically, teams have been following this trade value chart pretty closely in recent years. I looked at every kind of similar trade I could find where teams were going up, down, around the 9th pick, anywhere in the teens, in the 20s. And they really do a good job of deciding, hey, just to make sure we both feel like this is fair, we'll throw in that extra 6th rounder. Let's make all the points add up. I actually found a trade from 2023 where the Lions and the Cardinals went from 12 to 6. The Cardinals moved up from 12 to 6, which is pretty similar. Couldn't find an exact match. And they exactly matched up on the trade chart. In order to do it, the Lions got the number 34 pick of the draft, which was a 2nd rounder, and a 5th. And then the Cardinals got a 3rd back. So it's a little confusing when they get all those picks in, but it shows you that they use this trade chart. So if you just want to know how could the Saints get a 2nd round pick, Saints could get a 2nd round pick if they just move down to 17 or 18. That would be move down to 18, get a 2nd round pick. I would love to see that for this team. One team I was looking at, it was pretty funny, is the Broncos at 20. We know Sean Payton loves to trade up. Everybody says nobody wants to trade up in this year's draft. Well, maybe Sean Payton would do it because he was part of this Saints team that traded up every year. If you go all the way down from 9 to 20, then Denver would owe like a 2nd and a 4th. Actually, and the Saints would still be losing on the trade chart. It would almost be like the Denver would give you a 2nd and a 3rd. You'd have to give them back a 6th or something like that. If they could trade down 10 spots, 11 spots, 8 spots, get a 2nd rounder or more,
you get
I would love it. Now, everybody is saying this is not the draft to do that because all teams believe the same thing, that 10 and 20, there's not a lot of separation. but teams always love a guy. I mean, we saw the Saints do this for Chris Olave in 2022. They moved up from 16 to 11, 5 spots. They gave up a third and a fourth to do that, to move up just 5 spots for Chris Olave. That Cardinals-Lions trade I was talking about, that was for Paris Johnson. There was a trade a couple of years ago. The Vikings, just last year, the Vikings gave a fifth, a future third, and a future fourth to move up from 23 to 17 for Dallas Turner. There was a trade up for Broderick Jones. Like you can say these guys aren't worth trading up for, but if teams love a guy, they trade up for them. So I would absolutely do that if I were the Saints.
Yeah, no, I mean, those scenarios that you just went through, I think it bodes well to bolstering the cupboard, having more people in the back end of the draft that not even really the back end, because that's just the second round and you'll get third too. Those are your top level players that you're going to have on this team for years to come. But it's funny that you stopped at pick 20, because at pick 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers,
Yeah.
team that needs a quarterback, kind of what would that look like in a scenario of, maybe, I'm not saying offload them like that, but what would kind of that compensation look like?
You're saying to move down from 9 to 20, or if you're saying move up from 40, which I know we'll talk about later.
I'm going to say we're about to talk about going to 40, but moving from 9 to 20 and kind of the.
So yeah, that's part of the reason I picked them. I mean, I looked at pick 20, and you're right. You're still in front of the Steelers. So I think this is, I'd move down to 20, even if I'm looking at, boy, I like a couple of these offensive tackles that aren't worth the 9th pick. Boy, I like a couple of these receivers that you can get at 20. I like the idea of moving down from 9 to 20. But yeah, that is an added element of this, is if you're still in front of the Steelers, maybe you pick that quarterback that you want before they get in there. And like I said, I mean, if you follow the trade value chart, if they move from 9 to 20, Denver would owe them a 2nd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and more, which feels crazy. But let's say that everyone agrees, hey, the price is cheaper this year because the players just aren't there. Although it is funny, I've heard a lot of people say how badly Denver wants that Joker running back. I mean, what if Ashton Genty is still there at 9, and Sean Payton's like, I'll give you guys a 2nd and a 3rd. I want Genty. It could be a win-win. But let's call it a 2nd and a 4th. Let's call it a 2nd and a 3rd, and you have to give back a 6th. I think if you're going 9 all the way to 20. But like I said, just to keep it simple, you move down to 18, 9 to 18, you get a 2nd-round pick. 9 to 17, you might get a 2nd-round pick. And boy, that seems so worth it to me. But easy for me to say. Saints haven't done it in 18 years or whatever it's been for. It's a philosophy they just don't believe in. But if ever a team needed to do that, it's a Saints team that needs to rebuild their entire core from top to bottom this year. So I'd love to see it happen.
You heard about Genty's statement from yesterday that he put out?
Oh yeah, it was a good one. It's the tackle football one.
Yeah.
I draft the guy that nobody can tackle.
Exactly. I mean, hey man, I've never seen draft marketing kind of like that, but we're in that new era of it. But
he's not going to be available to the Saints at 9. He's not going to be available to the Broncos at 9. I have a feeling you got to get up above the Saints to take it.
You think you just got to go early? I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of like, okay, Genty is cool, but like, I like that. I like that a lot.
Oh, you starting to switch?
That was a positive move for me.
Look, I think Genty's worth a top 10 pick, maybe a top 5 pick in this draft. His value, without question. I think the Saints are in a different place. They're not in the, but boy, if you're the Broncos and you could trade up into the top 10 and add Ashton Genty, like a team like that, I'd be like, here we go. Like, I just don't think Genty is the first piece of a rebuild. But boy, if you've already got some pieces in place, he is absolutely probably a top 5 talent in this draft.
Yeah, I think, but also just continuing on with the main topic, when you look in retrospect of every draft, you say, man, this player was right here. We could have gotten him.
Yeah.
I really think about like Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson, how the Eagles took him and then the Vikings just were gifted Jefferson on a platter. Now he's like the top receiver in the league. But if you feel the conviction, and we've constantly said this throughout covering the draft, on a player that, this is the guy, instead of just making an exception or bending kind of on where you're rules are, then you might need to stay at 9 because now in
Yeah, of
terms of
course.
starting the rebuild, of course, with those second, third, fourth round draft picks, you can stockpile pieces that you're going to need. But if the difference maker in terms of
Yeah.
who you want to start off building your culture with is right there, I have to say you stay right there if you feel that conviction. Now, if you're wishy-washy on all of that,
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a very simple formula. If Saints put a grade on every player, they put their magnets up on their board. Um, there's some that gets adjusted a little bit based on need. I don't think need exists this year. I mean, they need everything. There was a really interesting conversation with the is it the Raiders GM now, Spytech, or is it the Chargers GM? I'm getting confused. I think Spytech's with the Raiders now, but when he was with
They
the
change
Browns,
people so much over there.
when he was with the Browns once, he said they had two guys they really loved with the
That's
seventh pick in the draft. Yeah, and one was Joe Hayden, and one was the safety who ended up going fifth that year. And they said we were going back and forth. What if they're both on the board for us? They said one of the reasons we had decided we were going to go with Joe Hayden was because we loved T.J. Ward, a safety that we thought for sure we could get in round 2. And so we thought, well, we'll take Hayden in round 1. We'll get our safety that we love in round 2. So decisions like that come into play all the time.
yeah.
Need does factor in. Some, the team might have a philosophy about running back. Look, we're not taking a tight end in round 1. We got to take a tackle or a defensive in round 1. Those conversations do happen all the time. But in general, if you've got a cloud of 4 or 5 names and you'd be happy with all 4 or 5 of them, that's when you trade down. If you've got one name and it's a whole tier above every other name on the list, you either trade up or you take that guy. And unless we're in the draft room with the Saints and unless we're looking at that board, we can't say for them. And I don't disagree with that. Like, we've all done fantasy drafts. Like, if it's like, boy, I hope this one guy falls to me. You don't care what all the experts say. No, actually, all 4 of those guys are equal. You're like, no, I want Kyle Tucker. Like, I don't think Kyle Tucker is equal to everybody else. He's the one I've been praying and fall to me. I'm turning that pick in as soon as possible. And that's usually how it works out for the Saints.